Hello and welcome to another Atypical Philosopher video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. It's another walk through the front line on a fairly interesting day. Quite a bit has happened. Overnight, the usual attacks by Russia. Nikopol down near Zaporizhia has been targeted, as well as Sumy up north. So a bunch of rockets, I think sort of 40-odd rockets hit Sumy, I believe, or were aimed at Sumy. There's also been reports of Sevastopol being under drone attack. So let's have a look at a few bits and pieces before we do the front line. So, okay, first things first, Rasputitsa, as it is called in Russian, the seasonal mud in both autumn and spring is causing a right old issue, as everyone knew it would. But I mean, there are plenty of videos you can see online of people just getting stuck in mud, vehicles and humans alike. It is really becoming quite a problem. There has been claims about mobilization. So Russians claim they finished mobilization and that something like 84,000, 82,000, 84,000 troops have been transported to the front lines, and that leaves another 216,000 or so still being trained, ready to go. I mean, that's a very neat number. That all adds up to 300,000, as if they've done this very neat total 300,000 mobilization. They got exactly that right number, and that's what's happened. There's never how things work. So I think there's going to be some manipulation of numbers. However, we are certainly seeing mobilized troops hitting the front line. There's no doubt about that. And in fact, I would say that's partly why there's been a little bit of stasis, because these troops are plugging holes. Now, these mobilized troops, as plenty of videos have shown, and videos from Russians from the mobilized troops themselves, and there's another video that came up today that was them just laughing at how bad their training was, where that bunch over there have got guns and we don't have guns, and we don't even know what we're supposed to be doing. Anyway, it's all pretty terrible, but they're being sent to the front lines. What this means is that those troops are only ever going to be used defensively, really. You can't rely on troops like that to do offensive attacks, okay? So these mobilized troops are for defensive reasons, certainly at the moment, until they've got in-unit training that brings them up to standard. So there's that. There's also this rumor, or not a rumor, there's actually plenty of claims about this, that, in fact, the Daily Beast has got an article, I'm going to talk about it later, but there's this two-tiered, some say three-tiered approach to troops. So they're putting, in some places, like Bakhmut, they're putting uh, prisoners on the front line, and then behind them, Mobics or mobilized troops. So if the prisoners run backwards and try and flee, they get shot by their own Mobics. But then behind the Mobics, these mobilized troops are the more experienced troops. So you've got three lines, and each one behind is making sure that the one in front doesn't run away. It's just like, what? Is this how you're doing war? It's just absolutely obscene. So anyway, I'll talk about that a little bit later. But the fact is that these mobilized troops are being brought to the front line. There's evidence that certainly in Kherson, there's a whole bunch of them being pushed into the region, as well as up on the Svatove-Kreminna line, and that they are making a difference. They are boots on the ground, but only as far as a kind of a defensive positioning goes. Anyway, yeah, just a bit of a talk about that. They said they finished doing 300,000, but then other Russian sources saying that it's actually as many as 700,000. That we also have, as I mentioned, Sevastopol being hit by drone attacks, and in fact, there's some quotes saying that the Black Sea Fleet were under a bit of pressure. Don't know what's happened yet, but Russians are saying that they're all shot down. Obviously, if they're all shot down, you wouldn't see that kind of smoke there. So, we'll see as the dust settles how major that is. But I think for a long time, I think the Ukrainians should have been using, as many different ways as hitting Sevastopol as possible. I think, you really give the people in Crimea the jitters and feel like they are not safe. I think would be a useful thing for the Ukrainians to do. And just I'll talk about this when I come on to Bakhmut. Actually, that can come later. So now just before I get onto the front line for sure, there's this growing issue back in Russia between Prigozhin and Wagner, as well as military bloggers and other in the pro-war community, and this kind of growing schism between them and the Kremlin. And the ISW talks a lot about this in their update for yesterday. It's worth just having a look at that. I won't go into it now. It includes Kadyrov as well, the Chechen leader. Lots of accusations going either way, and a fragmentation of the unity behind the war in Russia. So that's a very useful development. What's quite interesting, as we go on to the first part of the front line, and we're going to look at the Kupiansk down to Svatove and the Svatove-Kreminna front line, and indeed Bilorivka just below that, sort of to the west of Lysychansk. This whole area has had quite a lot of activity last night. Particularly on concerning this highway, the P66 highway, that sits to the west of the Krasna River and to the east of the Kherson River, right in the middle of the two. Now, apparently, all pro-Ukrainians were super excited last night because it looked like they either had control of the P66 or parts of the P66 or fire control over the P66. And this is pretty significant. But there's no real clarity about exactly where that is taking place and the details about that, to the point that, and I think this happened quite late last night. I talk about last night being UK time, because the Institute for the Study of War doesn't even mention in their daily report anything about the P66 other than, attacks, further repelled attacks towards Svatove-Popivka, which we talked about yesterday. So let's go and have a look and see what we can make sense of in terms of this area. Okay, as we look to the north of Svatove, so just to give you an idea of what we're talking about, we have Kupiansk down to Svatove and Svatove to Kreminna, and that's our front line. Up towards Kupiansk, not a lot of change again. So Vilshana, Pesho-Travneve doesn't seem to be happening too much around there right now. It all seems to be about Kuzumivka again towards Svatove. The Russians are making some slightly contradictory claims. So some saying they're attacking from Berestove to Kuzumivka, and the Russians repelled them at Kuzumivka, and then others saying that there was fighting in and around Berestove. And so the Russians are confused about exactly what's going on there, or at least contradictory. So I would say keep it there, the front lines. But as we get down to Svatove, I want to just clear up some sort of topography to do with the area. There's a bit of confusion on one of my threads yesterday. So just to let you know, the P66 sits on top or on higher ground than all these towns down from Svatove down to Kreminna. So the P66 is tactically very useful. And the ground keeps rising as we go further and further westwards. As we go eastwards, it drops. And so therefore, if you have control over the P66, it makes getting control over these towns very much easier. And Svatove as well. Svatove sits, there's actually a little bit to the north, there's higher ground as well, north and west. It's not easy to defend Svatove once the Ukrainians advance close enough. And it's going to be the same for all of these settlements. So let's look at the even more topographical map. You've got Svatove here, and you can see that the P66 highway sits on top of this sort of river valley, if you like, with its floodplain, and that these towns sit on the floodplain. And P66 control is not only incredibly useful for the supplies moving up and down, and there have been talk about how many trucks have been hit over the last couple of days. It could be that the P66 has been coming to fire control over the last couple of days, and they've been able to take out quite a lot of Russian supply trucks. I don't know. But the claims are now that the P66 has either been breached or it is under fire control from the Ukrainians. So we look at this pro-Ukrainian source here. It says the Ukrainian force has reportedly cut the P66 highway. This is in line with earlier pressure from the Ukrainian forces, most likely either at Nezerinye area or the crossing near Ploshchanka. and that Russian sources report Ukrainian activity near Olyansky. I would just remind you that Olyansky is further up north, so this is again this move towards Olyansky up here, near just south of Persia Travnevi. So again, activity up there. But then he says, okay, it's either going to be around here, Nezherinye, which is very close to Svatove, or down here at Ploshchanka, which is nearer to Krasnoyarshchensky. Now, if you remember, there was a just after the sort of the move eastwards that saw the fall of Liman. There was talk about the Ukrainians did get a foothold in Krasnoyarshchensky, which is also on the other side of the Krasna River. But since then, they've pulled back, and it's been fighting around Nevsky and then down Terny, Yampolivka, and Torsky. And indeed, the Russians again are saying that there's fighting around Torsky. But they've also conceded, I think, that Dobrova has been lost. So I will move that red to further to the north, because this now seems a confirmed piece of territory gained by the Ukrainians. So today it's going to all be about what happens along this P66 highway and how robust the move is to the east by the Ukrainians, and whether they can get troops onto and munitions, armaments onto this road and use it to then strike towards these towns. This will be hard to hit from the east because of the elevated ground. It won't be impossible, of course, but it might be difficult for the Ukrainians to keep hold of this if they're getting hammered by the artillery of the Russians. But over the past few weeks, the Ukrainians have been hitting the Russians in key places, certainly in terms of ammo depots and command and control centers. So it'll be really interesting to see how the battle for this P66 highway goes over the next week, and in fact, what goes on with Svatove. There's been talk about people, Russians pulling, or pro-Russians pulling out of all of these villages around here and then retreating to Svatove. That's like the admin and civilian people, because this is now all up for grabs to some extent. So anyway, that's a move there. Didn't feature at all on the ISW, but it came out quite late last night that things were happening along that line. Okay, here's a couple of the sources. So here's Wargonzo. According to Russian source Wargonzo, the situation in Svatove is not good for Russian forces at all. Dobrova has also come under Ukrainian army control, and the Ukrainian army is very close to controlling the P66 road connecting Svatove to Kreminna. I expanded the areas, as Noel, speaking of Ukrainian control near more eastwards towards Kreminna, given attack reports on the P66, which require close positioning. Also, there are no more Russian counterattacks reported. Shelling has decreased. I have heard some claims of Russian attacking around Torsky again, but again that happens every single day. And again, the one I read you earlier. So, okay. This is also quite interesting. This is in the village of Nevsky in the Luhansk region. This is just video footage of quite how much stuff was captured off the Russians. And if this continues, like if this is a one-way street, the Russians aren't capturing this amount of equipment off the Ukrainians, and a few captured soldiers there, then this is just a consistent degrading of the equipment and capabilities of the Russians. Now, there have been so many videos of of large numbers of Russian POWs captured that, and the question is, are these predominantly mobilized troops that are being sent into the area, don't really know what they're doing, get captured, or want to get captured? It could be all of the above. Okay, so as we move further down south, let's move on to Bakhmut. Let's go through just a few of the Defmon Twitter threads here. So Svatove-Kreminna, which is further down south, so all the way down to sort of that Lysychansk area. So he says that the Ukrainians have repulsed attacks in the area of Avdivka and Bilorivka. Russian sources claim. Okay, and I've talked about that one before. So now we're going further down south to Bilorivka, and Bilorivka is this key settlement that is perhaps an important stepping stone to controlling this forested area, which the Ukrainians have mainly under their control, and they can use that to flank up north here towards Kreminna, maybe cut off Russian troops in this pocket here. But it's just we just don't know where the Russian troops are around here, or the Ukrainians. This is all sort of a bit of an unknown still. And then yeah, so Bilorivka is being fairly hotly contested. Okay, let's continue going down, and we get to Bakhmut. And what is claiming to be happening in Bakhmut. He talked about Avdivka there. So Avdivka is this tiny village to the south of Bakhmut, and this perhaps represents. So there's two bits of movement here. So Zelenopilya and Avdivka, where the Russians have struck out westwards. Two little counterattacks there. Could this be the fact that they are failing to get Klishchivka and Opitny? And so they're doing a wider attempted encirclement of Bakhmut. It could well be, but they've certainly made movements there. Other than that, it's really quiet around Bakhmut, or at least there's always going to be shelling, but there's just no news coming out of anything major happening around that area. Let's move down to our next position, which is going to be, of course, as we move further down this Donetsk line, front line, to Donetsk and Avdivka. So Avdivka, again, it's pretty stable directly around there, but there is fighting rather similar to Bakhmut. It looks like the Russians are failing to do the close encirclement. So Pervomaisky is not really changed. Vodyanye, they're holding out there, and Opitny, and this is where the fighting is. And there was a little bit of movement around Vodyanye for the Russians, but essentially they've stopped there. So it looks like they're trying again further south. So Nevelsky here, it looks like the Russians are moving towards there and have made some movement westwards in perhaps a larger encirclement. And I believe there's sort of fighting going further up north here, although without much movement. Not a lot going on in New York at the moment, but between Avdivka and New York, it seems like the Russians are trying this larger encirclement. Okay, as we come further down south, there's been talk of movement around Vuhledar. Okay, and this is a bit of action happening. So let's go to Knoll again. Russian sources say that they have started to actively engage Ukrainian positions in Vuhledar area using K-52 attack helicopters and Su-25 and Su-34 attack aircraft. In addition, the TOS-1 flamethrower Solin Sepyok was used. We're waiting for confirmation from the Ukrainian side. So this is Russian claiming that they are pushing towards Vuhledar. This has always been a fairly hot area. Vuhledar, it gets mentioned quite a lot. We will see how that sort of develops over the next day or so. It's also worth noting that Ukrainians claim to have shot down a Mi-8 Ukrainian helicopter in the Kherson area, but Ukrainians have claimed to have shot down, I think, two Su-25s or maybe 24s jets somewhere in Ukraine, as well as a Russian Mi-8 themselves. So the Russians are losing air power, or certainly pieces of equipment in the air. If yes, there's anything to go by at 3-to-1 ratio. Right, so the next one is Vremivka. Sorry, so Vremivka is seeing some fighting. This is the Russians on the offensive around here, and claim to have taken. I've just adjusted my lines to be a little bit more accurate, but there's fighting going on Vremivka, as we can see from. Defmon says that the Russians tried to advance there, but no suit for them. The area has been fairly calm lately, but it seems to be heating up there. So we'll watch out for that area as well. So that's Vremivka, which goes on, towards Zaporizhzhia. Okay, as we move westwards, we're going to move to Kherson. And what has been going on here, again, really difficult to get clear information about movement on this front. We're hearing lots of different rumors about various things. So apparently in Berislav, Russians are changing into civilian clothes, but this could be because that's their off time, and you've got a bit of downtime, and they're actually using the local, apartments to live in, or it could be that they're getting ready for the Ukrainians to attack Berislav, and they want to have a have the chance of kind of melting into the background and pretending to be Ukrainian. There are other rumors, according to several sources, said that this is a Russian VDV, so these are a pretty decent force fighting Ukrainian forces in the vicinity of Berislav in Kherson. If it's true, it means a big breakthrough Ukrainian forces through the Russian lines. But again, if it's true, is the key here. So this is a long way down. We've got, still Milove to Duchani. You've now got the deep state map reading back some of its, territory that they think is controlled by the Ukrainians in this particular area. Let's have a quick look at that. So this is the deep state map that has all this area just south of Duchani under the control of the Russians down to Milove and all the way up to Plachki and just to north of Ishchenka and Brushkinsky. So this is broadly in line with what the Russians claim rather than some of the Ukrainian claims previously. So, deep state is seeing that in line with what the Russian sources are saying. We shall see. Again, there's just not a lot coming out there because of the tight operational security from the area. Now, what is interesting is this Chornobivka area. So Chornobivka, just to let you know and to see it on my map here. So Chornobivka is the airstrip, the airfield that has been hit so many times that it now has its own Wikipedia page, and there are memes and jokes about it. So just to let you know, this is the kind of gift that you often see. The Chornobivka or Chernobivka, it's spelt and pronounced in different ways, it seems, or certainly spelt in different ways. This is the airfield that has been hit and then filled up with equipment, then hit again, then filled up with equipment, then hit again. And people were ridiculing the Russians for just, the definition of an insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Well, it turns out that finally the Chornobivka airfield Russians have withdrawn their equipment. As seen on satellite images from the 27th of October. Since the beginning of the occupation in the Kherson region, even the constant destruction of their equipment at this airport was not reason to leave the position. So even though they were getting hit and hit and hit, they still kept putting equipment there. But now they're finally pulled out. So in Kherson airport near Chernobivka is quiet tonight. Imagery shows that the vehicles have been removed, leaving just scars in the form of mud trails and vehicle revetments. There were so many attacks here. There's a Wikipedia page, and this is indeed the Wikipedia page, 22 Chornobivka attacks. So there you go. It just details all of the many attacks they've had there. So that's a little bit of sort of context to some of the stuff that's going on. But again, not an awful lot of detail to be had coming out of Kherson right now. The thing about Kherson, and you get these theories coming out now that actually this was a trap. First of all, Ukraine set the trap for the Russians in saying we're going to attack Kherson, we're going to attack Kherson, we're going to attack Kherson, and then they drew all their troops into there, and then the Ukrainians hit all the bridges and ferries and whatnot, and stopped supply getting across there, and therefore trapped these soldiers in. So then Zelensky claimed the other night that the rumor of the Russians pulling out of Kherson, the military pulling out there, came from the Russian side, from some of these Russian sources. He said it didn't come from us. So the theory then is that the Russians are saying we're pulling out of here to lure the Ukrainians into a hasty kind of like attack when the Russians were still in force, and this was itself a trap. So you get some pro-Russians now, or some others just saying that tactic was an attempt at a Russian trap, and that they haven't pulled out. Well, they certainly haven't pulled out, and it doesn't look like they're pulling out. They are fortifying these areas, and they are creating defensive lines. Exactly what's going on, I don't know. Anyway, that's the frontline report for you. Thank you so much for your support. Things are probably going to be happening today, certainly up on the P66 highway near Svatove. I don't know about all that much happening in Kherson. I want to try and get some uh, better idea of exactly where the lines are here. It could well be the Russian lines are more accurate, but again, it's difficult to get quality information. As ever, you can support my channel and the work I do by buy me a coffee, PayPal, YouTube thanks, all those usual things. Or if you want to buy some stash, go to uasupporter.com/ATP. And if you want to buy a backpack, go and do it. If you want to show your support for Ukraine, there are plenty of really nice pieces of kit you can buy that shows your support of Ukraine. Please do so, and if you do that through that link /ATP, I get a tiny bit of commission. As ever, do question everything, particularly myself and particularly yourselves. I say this on the end of my philosophy videos: question everything, particularly yourself. So you are the easiest person to fool. Just think about who your sources are and take everything with a pinch of salt and look at a variety of sources, not just people who agree with you. Anyway, Toodle Pips, I'll see you later in the Ukraine War Update extra video. Thank you and goodbye.